So I'm often asked how my parents felt about me going into storytelling. Well, I have to back up for just a moment because initially I was going to be an actor. And in many ways, I still am an actor. And my parents, being parents, their attitude was, well, why don't, this acting thing is nice to do on the side, but why don't you get a real job and you can do the acting thing, when you do the acting thing. But to me, acting was going to be a full-time thing. And a real job was going to be on the side. So, my mom in particular was really concerned about this acting thing and it being a hobby. Now, back then, I was known as that poet that acts out his stuff. And I guess you could say I was a spoken word artist before we had the phrase spoken word artist. So a lot of times when I would do a show, they would sandwich me between two electronic like bands or people that had speakers or mics and stuff like that. And then they would put me on and basically, no magnification, no audio magnification at all. But I remember being at one particular performance where I asked them if they had a chair that looked like a throne, and they happened to have one. That's why I asked. And I asked one of the musicians if they would play me on. Now, I don't remember whether it was a flute or whether it was a drummer, because yes, I've been introduced by flutes, drums, saxophones, and a number of other instruments too. So they played me on, and I walked in, and I probably was wearing African clothing, and I walk in a very stately manner. And I sit upon my throne, and I get myself comfortable, and I begin to do what it is that I do. Now, when you're performing, as a rule, they bring down the house lights. They bring down the lights where the audience is. And on stage, you can't see faces. But as I'm doing my performance, I see a spotlight, what appears to be a spotlight, shining down on this one particular lady. And she's glowing. Now, there was no actual spotlight on her, but it appeared to be a spotlight on her, and she's glowing. I mean, truly glowing. And so I finished doing my performance, and then I meet her after the performance, and we're talking. And I'm saying, Mom, all of a sudden in the middle of my performance, I could see you. It was as if a spotlight was shining on you, and you were glowing. And there was some women in the background, but I really couldn't make them out. My mom said, well, while you were performing, the women behind me were going, his mother must be so proud of him. Yes, she must be very proud of him. And I leaned back and I said, that's my son. And that was my first experience in my mom beginning to accept that what I was doing was not just a hobby or something to be done on the side. Plus, she found out I got paid. I think that's what won her over more so than the compliments about, she must be so very proud of her son. Yes, and he got paid too. So as I continue to evolve and becoming a griot or griot, by the way, it is not French. As I continue to evolve as a griot or griot, storyteller, not yet quite a master storyteller, I was being interviewed by a Canadian news outlet. And it was after performance. My mom was sitting in the audience. Well, the audience was gone, but my mom was sitting waiting because she was my TC, my transportation captain. She was my ride that day. And I'm being interviewed, and so somehow the subject of my mom comes up. I said, well, she's sitting in the audience because she's my ride today. And he said, your mother is here? I said, yes, she is. Well, bring her up. I'm thinking to myself, well, there goes my interview. This is now my mother's interview. So they bring my mom up, and they asked her, when did he start telling stories? And my mom says, and this is a true story, my mom says, my son, when he came out talking. Yamma, 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 yamma. Yamma, 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 yamma. The boy didn't have a tooth in his mouth, and he was already talking. Yamma, 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 yamma. Yamma, 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 yamma. See, now back in the days, the doctors would pick up the babies by the popo and spank them on the behind to make them take that first breath of fresh air. And that's what they did. They spanked my boy, but they didn't spank him to get him to take a fresh breath of air. They were going, shut up, shut up, shut up. She said, my baby boy, not a tooth in his mouth, yamma, 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 looked up at the doctor and said, actually, that was not necessary. That was my mom. And I'm quite sure there's some, this isn't a storytelling story, but it's a story related to it. One summer, I was doing a program called LIFT, Learning is Fun Time. And we had such a large population that we had to have 2 separate campuses. And I had to be on each campus. So we needed someone who could carry on when I wasn't there, and we hired my mom. My mom is phenomenal with children. She can get children to, especially boy children, to produce and do things that nobody else could get them to do. She could get them to do their homework and study and read and write, all that kind of stuff. So anyhow, we're at the other campus, and I am verbally correcting someone and giving him instructions to sit and not to move. And my mother tells me, don't talk to that child that way. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I turned to the boy and I said, don't you move. Act like there's glue on your bottom and don't move from that seat. And I said, Mrs. Callender, because my not so secret identity, I am Lord Lorenzo Augusta Callender II. I said, Mrs. Callender, may I see you in the hall for a moment? So I go out in the hall and I said, Mrs. Callender, Mom, you can't do that. Well, I'm not one of the children. I know I'm your child, but I'm not one of the children. And when I'm giving a child a command or instruction, you can't countermand me because you usurp my authority. You diminish my authority. And she's looking at me, and I can tell she wants to argue. I said, Mom, I don't want to pull rank on you. I'm the director. You're the co-director. I sign your paycheck. She looks at me and says, from 9 to 5, you're my director. She says, remember that, but I'm always your mama, and I have the car to take you home. Excuse me? I think she won that argument. But that was just my mom. My mom had a way with children, and I guess she had a special way with me too. Miss you, Mama.